Jonah West wiped his brow as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the choppy sea. His boat, the Wanderer, bobbed gently in the quiet aftermath of a long day's work. Jonah was not a man given to superstition, but the solitude of the sea often played tricks on his mind. Today, however, his net felt unusually heavy as he hauled it in. "Come on, old girl, don't fail me now," he muttered to himself, securing the wheel and grabbing the net with both hands. As the contents spilled onto the deck, his eyes caught a glint of something amidst the usual catch of fish, an unusual, shimmering scale. "What in the world?" he breathed out, approaching the heap cautiously. Hidden among the sea creatures was a figure distinctly unfish-like, lying tangled in his net. A sharp intake of breath escaped him as he realized it was an alien, her body covered in iridescent scales that reflected the dying light. The alien stirred, a low moan echoing from her lips, eyes fluttering open to reveal orbs like deep-sea glass. Jonah took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and fascination. "Hey there, you're okay. You're safe," Jonah said gently, unsure if she could understand him. He knelt down, attempting to untangle her from the net without causing further harm. The alien watched him, her breathing shallow. As their eyes met, a moment of silent understanding passed between them. She attempted to speak, her voice a melodic whisper, yet the words were foreign, lilting strangely in the cool air. "Do you understand me?" Jonah tried again, his voice steady. A slight nod from her, and a whisper, "Help, please." Jonah worked faster, loosening the net. "I've got you. Don't worry," he reassured her, finally freeing her. He noticed her tail, long and powerful, a stunning contrast to the delicate torso of what seemed like a humanoid upper body. With great care, Jonah lifted her, carrying her to a makeshift bed he'd prepared from old blankets inside the cabin of the Wanderer. The alien clutched at him weakly, her touch cold but not unpleasant. "What were you doing in these waters? This far from the shipping lanes? It's dangerous." Jonah spoke more to himself as he wet a rag to clean her wounds. "Lost? Storm," she managed to say, each word accompanied by a grimace. Jonah nodded, processing her fragmented sentences. "You got caught in the storm last night? That was a bad one. Lucky I found you." As he administered first aid, the cabin door creaked open. Jonah looked up to see his old friend, Dr. Miles Harrow, whom he'd radioed earlier for help. Miles stepped in, his gaze immediately falling on the extraordinary figure on the bed. "Jonah, what have you got here?" His tone mixed astonishment with concern. "An alien, Miles. Caught her in my net. She needs help," Jonah explained, his voice low. Miles approached, his professional curiosity piqued as he took in her features. "Let's make sure she's not in any immediate danger. Can you understand us?" He addressed the alien, his tone kind. "Yes," she replied, her voice gaining a little strength. "I'm Miles, a doctor. I'm going to help Jonah take care of you," he said, beginning a gentle examination. Jonah watched, his usual reticence overridden by a surge of protectiveness. As the sun set completely, casting a warm glow through the small cabin window, he realized that tonight, the Wanderer had truly lived up to her name, bringing the distant and the strange right to his doorstep. Together, Jonah and Miles worked into the night, ensuring their unexpected guest would make it through to dawn, marking the beginning of an extraordinary new chapter in Jonah's life. In the dim light of early dawn, Jonah and Dr. Miles Harrow were still in Jonah's cabin, hovering over their unexpected guest. The alien, whom Jonah had begun to call Lyra, was resting more comfortably now, thanks to Miles's medical expertise and Jonah's diligent care. "Her physiology isn't all that different from ours, surprisingly," Miles commented as he packed away his medical kit. "She's stable, but we'll need to keep her hydrated and calm. Stress could be a real issue without knowing more about her biology." Jonah nodded, pouring fresh water into a glass. He walked over to Lyra, offering it to her with a gentle, "Here, try to drink some of this." Lyra's hand, slender and slightly webbed, reached out to take the glass, her grip uncertain. She managed a small smile as she sipped, her voice a quiet murmur. "Thank you, Jonah." Miles raised his eyebrows, looking between Jonah and Lyra. She picks up fast, doesn't she? Lyra, is that your name? Yes, Lyra, she confirmed, her gaze flicking curiously from Jonah to Miles and back again. Jonah sat down beside the bed, his curiosity overcoming his initial wariness. Lyra, can you tell us where you're from? We want to help if we can. Her eyes widened, the deep blue of them seeming to ripple like the ocean. From the stars, she said, her hand gesturing upwards in a sweeping motion. My home is not like this. More water, less land. Miles jotted notes on his pad, muttering, fascinating. An aquatic planet, perhaps. And how did you end up here? Lyra's face clouded with confusion and distress. Was exploring. Got caught in storm, swept away. Then darkness and then… Here, Jonah exchanged a look with Miles. We need to figure out how we can get you back home. Do you have a way to contact your people? Device broken in the storm, Lyra replied, a note of sadness threading through her voice. She pointed to a shattered device attached to what looked like a belt made of the same shimmering material as her scales. Let's take a look at that, Miles suggested, standing up. Maybe there's something I can do. Jonah carefully unfastened the device from the belt, handing it over to Miles, who examined it with a keen interest. I'll see what I can salvage from this. I have a friend, Clara, who's good with this kind of tech. Maybe she can help. As Miles left the cabin with the device, Jonah turned his attention back to Lyra. You'll be safe here, Lyra. We'll do everything we can to help you. Thank you, Lyra murmured, looking around the small cabin. Your home is comforting. Jonah chuckled softly. It's just an old boat, but it's home. Do you sing? When you spoke earlier, it almost sounded like music. Lyra's lips curved into a more genuine smile. Yes, we sing. It's how we share, learn, feel. I sing for you? I'd like that, Jonah replied, his voice warm. Lyra took a deep breath and began to sing softly. The melody was unlike anything Jonah had ever heard, complex and hauntingly beautiful, filled with longing and a deep, resonant joy. As she sang, the cabin seemed to fill with light, as if her voice could bend the very air. Jonah listened, spellbound. The song spoke of faraway oceans and starlit skies, of deep underwater currents and the pull of tides so strong they shaped destinies. By the time Lyra's song tapered off, both were smiling. That was beautiful, Lyra. Thank you, Jonah said, his voice thick with emotion. It is my home, my heart, Lyra explained, her eyes bright. I share it with you. Jonah nodded, feeling a connection to this alien being that went beyond words. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sunrise paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink. In that moment, Jonah felt a promise swell within him. A promise to do whatever it took to help Lyra find her way back home. As the days blended into weeks, Lyra's strength returned, bolstered by Jonah's care and the increasing familiarity of her surroundings. Each day brought new lessons for both Lyra and Jonah, as they exchanged knowledge about their worlds. One crisp evening, as they sat on the deck of the Wanderer, Jonah pointed to the stars shimmering above. Those are the constellations we navigate by, he explained, tracing the outlines of Orion and Cassiopeia in the sky. Lyra listened intently, her eyes reflecting the starlight. We navigate by the currents under the stars, flowing deep below the surface. Your stars are beautiful, but different. Jonah smiled, pulling a small, battered telescope from below deck. Here, let me show you something even better. He set up the telescope, adjusting the focus to a distant star cluster. Take a look. Lyra peered through the lens, her gasp audible. It's like a gathering of lights, a festival in the sky. That's exactly what it is, Jonah laughed. We call it the Pleiades. As Lyra stepped back from the telescope, she hummed a low melody, the notes floating softly in the night air. In my world, we have a similar gathering, but it's in the ocean. Bioluminescent creatures that light up the water. Jonah, intrigued by the comparison, sat beside her. Could you tell me more about it? Maybe sing it? Lyra nodded, her voice rising in a song that swirled around them, mimicking the flow of ocean currents. Jonah, captivated, found himself drawn into her world through the ebbs and flows of her tune. The next day, Jonah decided to introduce Lyra to another facet of human culture, cooking. In the small galley kitchen of his boat, he gathered ingredients, explaining their origins and uses. Today, we'll make something from my homeland, a stew. It's hearty and warm, perfect for a chilly evening. Lyra watched, fascinated, as Jonah moved around the kitchen with ease. We use heat from volcanic vents to cook, she shared, watching him stir the pot. This is different, but it smells wonderful. As the stew simmered, Jonah invited Lyra to add a touch of her world to the meal. Lyra, uncertain at first, hummed a melody, waving her hands gently over the pot. To Jonah's amazement, the stew began to emit a soft glow, the flavors intensifying. Your magic, Jonah said, wide-eyed. It's like you've woven your song into the food. Lyra smiled shyly. We often enhance our meals with songs. It adds layers of flavor. They shared the meal on deck, under the stars, the stew unlike anything Jonah had ever tasted, rich and complex. You've just raised the bar for dinner, Lyra. I might need you to sing for every meal. Laughing, Lyra shook her head. Only if you teach me more about your cooking. Their days settled into a comfortable routine, with each sunrise and sunset bringing them closer. Jonah taught Lyra about fishing and navigating by the stars, while Lyra shared stories of her people, their art, and their way of life beneath the waves. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Jonah turned to Lyra. I've been thinking about your device, the one you use to contact your people. Miles is still working on it, but maybe there's another way to send a signal. Lyra's face lit up with hope. What do you have in mind? We could try using some of the old radio equipment I have on board. It's not much, but maybe it's enough to boost a signal to where it needs to go. Lyra agreed eagerly, and together they spent the night adjusting dials and testing frequencies, their efforts a mix of human ingenuity and alien intuition. As they worked side by side, the boundary between their worlds seemed to blur, their friendship deepening into a bond forged by shared experiences and the vast, starlit sky above. Jonah had taken Lyra farther along the coast than he had initially planned, encouraged by her quick recovery and curious nature. The rugged terrain of the shoreline offered a blend of rocky cliffs and sandy beaches, perfect for long walks and deep conversations. This reminds me of the shores near my home, Lyra commented as they trekked along a narrow path edged by tall grasses whispering in the wind. But the sand there is darker, mixed with volcanic ash. Jonah looked over, intrigued. Volcanic ash? That must be a sight to see. Here, it's mostly quartz and shell fragments. Quite ordinary by comparison. Lyra laughed, a sound that Jonah had grown to appreciate for its musical quality. Nothing about your world is ordinary to me, Jonah. As they found a comfortable spot overlooking the sea, Jonah pulled out a couple of sandwiches he had prepared earlier. Lunchtime, he announced, handing one to Lyra. Just ham and cheese. Nothing as exotic as your bioluminescent stew. Lyra accepted it with a smile, taking a tentative bite. It's good, she said after a moment. Simple, but very good. Jonah grinned, taking a bite of his own sandwich. Glad you approve. So, tell me more about your explorations. What's it like, traveling among the stars? It's vast and beautiful, but also lonely, Lyra confessed, gazing out at the expansive ocean. Each world has its own stories, its own landscapes. I collect them like memories. Jonah nodded, understanding the sentiment. I used to travel myself, before settling down to fish. There's something about the sea that keeps calling me back, though. It's not stars, but it's my own kind of vast. Lyra turned to him, her expression thoughtful. Maybe that's why we get along. You with your sea, and me with my stars. We both understand the call of the horizon. They spent the afternoon exploring the cliffs, with Lyra marveling at the seabirds and the occasional seal basking on the rocks. Jonah found himself sharing stories of his childhood, the adventures he'd had along these very shores. As the day faded into evening, they made their way back to the Wanderer. Jonah decided to teach Lyra how to steer the boat, showing her the basics of navigation by the instruments on board. See, you align the compass like so, Jonah instructed, guiding her hands to the wheel. And keep an eye on the horizon. It helps you stay true to your course. Lyra took to it with natural ease, her eyes alight with excitement. It's like following the currents in space, but more tactile. That's it exactly, Jonas said, watching her with a mix of pride and admiration. You're a natural. The night grew deeper, and they sat on deck, a blanket draped over their shoulders as the air turned chilly. Jonah had brought out a small, portable radio, tuning it to a frequency that played soft music. Do you have dances on your planet? Jonah asked, the music setting a gentle rhythm around them. Lyra nodded. We do, but they're different, more fluid, like the ocean currents. Show me one of your dances? Jonah stood, offering his hand with a shy smile. I'm no dancer, but I can show you a simple waltz. As they moved together to the music, Jonah leading clumsily at first, Lyra laughed, her laughter blending with the rhythm of the waves against the hull. They danced until the stars were bright overhead, each step bringing them closer in a friendship that was slowly bridging the gap between their worlds. The evening had settled in with a gentle breeze that whispered through the sails of the Wanderer. Jonah had anchored the boat in a secluded bay, the calm waters reflecting the starlit sky. The peaceful scene was perfect for the dinner he had planned. A simple meal, enhanced by the few culinary tricks he had learned from Lyra. As they sat across from each other at the small table set up on deck, Jonah poured 2 glasses of wine. I thought we might celebrate tonight, he said, raising his glass. To new friends and new understandings. Lyra smiled, touching her glass to his. To new friends, she echoed, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the lantern that hung overhead. The dinner was filled with laughter and stories. Lyra had begun to share more about her travels, the world she had seen, and the creatures she had encountered. Jonah, in turn, recounted tales of his adventures on the high seas, the storms he had weathered, and the peaceful solitude that had always brought him back to the water. As the meal came to an end, Lyra stood, looking out over the water. Your world is beautiful, Jonah. I see now why you love it so much. Jonah joined her at the railing, looking out at the moonlight dancing on the waves. It's always felt like home, but tonight, sharing it with someone else, it feels even more special. Lyra turned to him, her expression soft. I feel that too. I didn't expect to find a friend so far from my own home. There was a moment of silence, a comfortable pause as they both took in the night around them. Jonah then took a deep breath, a decision forming in his mind. Lyra, would you like to dance? There's no music, but we don't really need any, do we? A gentle smile spread across Lyra's face. I would like that very much. They moved together in an impromptu slow dance, guided by the rhythm of the waves and the wind. As they danced, Jonah found himself drawing closer to her, the differences between their worlds seeming insignificant. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder, and Jonah felt a surge of emotions he hadn't anticipated. The dance slowly came to a stop, and they found themselves standing close, the silence speaking volumes. Jonah looked down into Lyra's eyes, illuminated by the moonlight, feeling the pull of something undeniable between them. Lyra, he began, his voice barely above a whisper as he leaned closer. Yes, Jonah, she replied, her breath mingling with his. In a spontaneous moment, Jonah closed the distance, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss. Lyra responded with equal tenderness, her arms encircling his neck. The kiss deepened, fueled by the weeks of growing affection and the starry night that enveloped them. As they parted, breathless, Jonah looked at her with newfound wonder. I hope that was okay. Lyra nodded, her smile radiant. More than okay. I felt something wonderful. They returned to their seats, hands intertwined, sharing quiet words and soft touches. The night stretched on, filled with shared confidences and the warmth of newfound intimacy. Eventually, they retired to the cabin. Jonah, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, led the way. Inside, they continued their exploration of each other, their initial kiss evolving into a journey of mutual discovery. The touches were gentle and explorative, each learning the contours and responses of the other's being. As they finally lay together, the cabin bathed in the soft light of dawn creeping through the portholes, Jonah felt a peace he had never known. Lyra nestled against him, her presence a soothing balm to the loneliness he had long accepted as part of his life. "This night," Lyra murmured, her voice a contented sigh, "will remain in my heart forever." "And in mine," Jonah replied, holding her close, the sea and stars their silent witnesses. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, painting the cabin of the wanderer in warm hues. Jonah woke to find Lyra watching the play of light on the water through the porthole. Her serene expression mirrored the calm sea outside. "Good morning," Jonah murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Lyra turned to him, her smile bright. "Good morning, Jonah. I was just watching the sunrise. It's beautiful." Jonah propped himself up on one elbow, looking at her. "Not as beautiful as you," he said softly, which made Lyra chuckle. "As flattering as that is, I think the sunrise might still win," she teased, then her expression turned contemplative. "I had a dream last night about home. Want to talk about it?" Jonah asked, sitting up and drawing the blanket around them. "It was vivid. I was back on my planet, swimming in the luminescent waves. But when I tried to sing, the melody was gone. I think being here, with you, has changed me," Lyra explained, her gaze distant yet filled with a gentle warmth. Jonah reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Change isn't always bad. Maybe you're just finding new melodies to sing." Lyra nodded, leaning into his embrace. "Perhaps. But it also reminded me of my duty to return. My people might be worried." Jonah understood the weight of her words. "We should check in with Miles today. See if there's been any progress with the device." After a quick breakfast, they made their way to shore, where Miles had set up his makeshift workshop. The old boathouse was cluttered with parts and tools, a testament to Miles' various ongoing projects. "Ah, you're here." Miles greeted them as they entered. "I've got good news. I think I've managed to fix the communication device, with Clara's help." "That's great," Jonas said, relief evident in his voice. Lyra approached the workbench, looking at the now intact device with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Can we test it?" Miles nodded, activating the device. It hummed to life, the screen glowing with alien symbols. Lyra touched the screen, her fingers deftly moving over the controls. After a moment, her face lit up. "It's working. I'm sending a signal now," she announced, then paused as she waited for a response. The minutes stretched out, each passing second heavy with anticipation. Finally, the device beeped, and a message appeared on the screen. Lyra read it, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "They received my message. They're searching for me. They say they can trace the signal back to this planet," she translated. Jonah felt a pang of sadness, knowing what this meant. "When will they come?" "Soon," Lyra replied, turning to face him. "I don't know exactly when, but it will be soon." The rest of the day passed in a bittersweet haze. Jonah and Lyra returned to the boat, spending the afternoon reminiscing about their short time together. They talked about their favorite moments, the things they had taught each other, and the deep bond they had formed. As the sun set, they prepared a final dinner together, both trying to ignore the looming goodbye. They ate mostly in silence, the air filled with unspoken emotions. After dinner, Jonah took Lyra's hand, leading her back to the deck. "Let's just sit here, together," he suggested, pulling over a blanket as they sat watching the stars. Lyra rested her head on his shoulder, her voice soft. "Thank you, Jonah, for everything. You saved me, cared for me, and shared your world with me. I will carry this experience with me always." Jonah wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "And I'll never forget you, Lyra. No matter where you go, you'll always have a place here with me." They sat under the starlight, their hands intertwined, each lost in their thoughts, savoring the final moments of a profound connection that neither had expected but both would cherish forever. The horizon was tinged with the early light of dawn, signaling the beginning of what Jonah knew would be one of the hardest days of his life. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the sky, where soon a ship from her world would appear to take her home. "You know," Jonah started, breaking the silence, "I always thought farewells were just part of life at sea. You say goodbye, and you move on. But this is different." Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes soft. "I feel the same, Jonah." Leaving is harder than I thought it would be, especially leaving you. Jonah took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. I guess we should talk about keeping in touch. You said your people can send messages across space, right? Yes, we can send transmissions. I will talk to them about setting up a communication link with you. It won't be the same as being here, but at least we won't be completely apart, Lyra explained, a hopeful tone in her voice. That sounds good. Jonah managed to smile. I'd like that. They spent the morning preparing for the arrival of Lyra's people. Jonah gathered Lyra's belongings, few as they were, and helped her pack the device that had reconnected her with her home. Every action felt heavy with unspoken words and suppressed feelings. As they worked, Miles arrived, carrying a small, sturdy box. I made this for you, Lyra. It's a data module with information about Earth, our oceans, and some recordings of Jonah here, he said, handing it to her. A little piece of this world to take with you. Lyra accepted the box, her fingers tracing the carvings on the lid. Thank you, Miles. I will treasure this. And I've set up a receiver here, based on the specs of your device. We'll keep it running so whenever you send a transmission, we'll receive it, Miles added, looking between Lyra and Jonah. Thank you, Miles. That means a lot to us both, Jonah said, clapping his friend on the shoulder. The morning passed quickly, and soon, a shimmering light appeared in the sky, growing larger and clearer as it approached. It was Lyra's ship, descending gracefully toward the coast. It's time, Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jonah nodded, unable to speak. They walked to the shoreline, where the ship would land. The vessel was sleek and radiant, reflecting the morning sun in a blaze of light. As it landed softly on the sand, a hatch opened, and several of Lyra's people emerged. Lyra stepped forward to greet them, speaking in her musical language. After a moment, she turned back to Jonah, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. This is goodbye, for now, she said, reaching out to touch his cheek gently. But not forever. Jonah took her hand, holding it against his face. Not forever. I'll be waiting for your call, every day until it comes. They embraced, a long, lingering goodbye, filled with the promise of future hellos. Lyra then turned and walked towards her people, who welcomed her warmly, yet with a sense of urgency. As the ship began to rise, Jonah stood there, watching as it ascended higher and higher, until it was just a speck against the vast blue sky. He felt Miles's hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. Jonah took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the salty air. She'll call, he said, more to himself than to Miles. She will, Miles agreed. And we'll be here to answer. They stood together, watching the horizon long after the ship had disappeared, the bond of friendship between them stronger than ever, each man processing the journey that had brought them to this moment of farewell. The sun climbed higher, its light warm and comforting, as they turned to leave the beach, their hearts heavy but hopeful for what the future might hold. Jonah stood at the helm of the Wanderer, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sea met the sky, a line that seemed to hold both the memories of the past and the possibilities of the future. The early morning sun cast a golden glow across the deck, and the salty breeze was invigorating. Miles joined him, leaning against the railing. How are you holding up, Jonah? Jonah shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. I keep looking out there, half expecting to see her ship again. Miles nodded understandingly. It's hard, letting go of someone who changed your world. Yeah, it is. But we promised to keep in touch. I'm holding on to that, Jonah said, his voice carrying a mix of hope and melancholy. You did more than just host an alien visitor, Jonah. You made a friend, a connection across the stars. That's something extraordinary, Miles remarked, clapping Jonah on the back. Jonah chuckled softly. I guess when you put it like that, it does sound pretty incredible. We're still setting up the permanent communication station, right? That's the plan, Miles confirmed. Clara's coming by later to help finalize the setup. She's bringing some new tech that should boost the signal strength. Good. I want to make sure we're ready the moment Lyra calls, Jonah stated, turning back to look at the sea once more. The day moved forward with purpose as Jonah and Miles busied themselves with preparations. Clara arrived mid-morning, carrying equipment and a technician's enthusiasm. Jonah, Miles, this new array should do the trick. It's designed for deep space communications. We just need to install it on the upper deck, Clara explained, unpacking the components with practiced ease. Jonah watched as Clara and Miles worked, their efficiency a comfort to him. He handed tools to them when needed, feeling a part of something important, keeping his link to Lyra alive. As they installed the last piece, Clara wiped her brow and grinned. All set up. Jonah, want to do the honors and power it up? Jonah didn't hesitate. He switched on the device, and the small screen flickered to life, showing a ready status. It's working, Clara. Thank you. Of course. I'll monitor the first few transmissions, make sure everything's running smoothly. But you should be able to hear from Lyra anytime now, Clara assured him. With the work done, Jonah, Miles, and Clara gathered on deck, sharing a late lunch. The conversation was light, but filled with anticipation. As they were clearing up, the communication device crackled to life, startling them all. Jonah rushed to the console, pressing the receive button with a shaking hand. Lyra's voice filled the air, clear and melodious, even through the static. Jonah, can you hear me? Jonah's heart leaped. Lyra, yes, I can hear you. It's great to hear your voice. I've missed you, Jonah. I'm back home now, but it feels different after knowing your world, Lyra replied, her tone wistful. I feel the same, Lyra, but we'll keep talking, right? This isn't the end, Jonah said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Of course, Jonah. This is just the beginning for us, Lyra said warmly. Tell me about your day. Jonah smiled, the connection stable and strong, as he began to share the day's events. As he spoke, he felt a profound sense of peace. Though thousands of light years apart, the bond between him and Lyra remained unbroken, sustained by their shared experiences and the technology that now connected them. Miles and Clara listened, smiles on their faces, as Jonah's world expanded once again to include not just the vast oceans, but also the infinite stars above. As the conversation continued, the sun began to set, casting a warm, comforting glow over the wanderer. The sea around them sparkled under the fading light, a reminder of the beauty and mystery that life still held in store.